When a U.S. Marine stumbled upon a wounded German Shepherd curled around her dying pup, he expected heartbreak. But what happened next stunned even the toughest soldier. His decision not only changed the fate of the dogs, but also touched hearts across the nation. This is their incredible story. The forest was quiet that evening, its stillness broken only by the crunch of boots against dry leaves. Sergeant James, a U.S. Marine, moved steadily along the trail during a routine patrol. His years of service had trained him to notice the smallest sounds, and that night, something unusual caught his ear, a faint whimper, so weak it almost blended with the wind that he froze, listening. The sound came again, fragile and heartbreaking, like the cry of something fighting to hold on. Following the noise, James pushed through thick brush until his flashlight beam landed on a sight that stopped him cold. There, against a rusted fence, lay a wounded German Shepherd. Her fur was matted with blood, her breathing labored, yet she curled protectively around a tiny pup pressed against her chest. The pup's whines pierced the silence. Despite her pain, the mother refused to move, shielding her baby with everything she had left. James crouched low, his flashlight steady, but the sight before him nearly broke his composure. The German Shepherd's eyes burned with exhaustion, yet behind them was an unshakable fire. She bared her teeth weakly, letting out a low growl the moment he inched closer. Her body trembled, wounds staining the ground beneath her, but still she did not yield. The Marine raised a hand slowly. "Easy, girl. I'm not here to hurt you," he whispered, his voice softened with the gentleness of someone who knew the weight of loyalty. But the Shepherd refused to budge. Every time he moved, she shifted, curling tighter around her pup, shielding the tiny life with her own battered frame. The pup let out another faint cry, too weak to stand. James's chest tightened. He had seen bravery on the battlefield, but this was different. It wasn't duty, nor orders. It was a mother's love refusing to surrender, even if it meant her own end. For a moment, James felt powerless. If he rushed in, she might lash out in desperation. If he left, the pup wouldn't last. Her refusal wasn't defiance. It was a plea. Save him. But don't take him from me. James stayed perfectly still, the beam of his flashlight steady but his thoughts racing. He had faced gunfire, explosions, and the chaos of war, but never a choice like this. In front of him was a mother bleeding out, clinging to her pup with the last of her strength. Walking away wasn't an option, yet forcing her would only cause more harm. That he reached slowly into his pack and pulled out a canteen. Unscrewing the cap, he slid it gently across the dirt. The Shepherd's ears twitched. Her growl softened, replaced by heavy panting. Hesitantly, she stretched her tongue, lapping at the water while keeping her pup tucked firmly beneath her chest. "That's it, girl," James murmured. He rummaged again and pulled out a protein bar, breaking it into pieces and setting them just within her reach. The scent caught her attention. Hunger battled exhaustion, and at last, she took a bite. James exhaled, relief washing through him. He knew then what he had to do. He wouldn't leave them. He wouldn't let them fade into the forest unnoticed. His duty as a Marine wasn't just to protect people, it was to protect life. Tonight, that meant saving them both. With patience earned through years of service, James inched closer. He spoke in low tones, his voice steady, as though calming a frightened comrade. The Shepherd's eyes followed his every move, but her growl had faded to labored breaths. She was losing strength, and time was slipping away. When he was close enough, James gently extended his hand. The dog sniffed weakly, her body trembling. Then, as if surrendering to trust, she let her head fall against the ground. James wasted no time. He scooped the frail pup into his arms, its tiny chest rising and falling unevenly. The mother stirred, trying to stand, but collapsed again with a whimper. James spoke firmly, his decision clear. "You're coming with me." He pulled out his radio, calling for immediate support. Minutes felt like hours before headlights cut through the trees. Fellow Marines rushed to his side, carefully lifting the mother onto a stretcher while James clutched the pup close. Together, they began the tense journey back. Every bump of the vehicle, every cry from the pup, made James's grip tighten. He looked down at the mother beside him, her eyes half closed yet locked on her baby. Her fight wasn't over. Neither was his. The base clinic erupted with urgency the moment James burst through the doors. Medics rushed forward, their hands swift and sure as they lifted the pup from his arms and placed it on a small table. Another team tended to the mother, carefully cleaning her wounds while trying to stabilize her shallow breathing. James stood frozen, his heart pounding. He had seen doctors fight for soldiers' lives, but watching them battle for a dog and her pup struck something deeper. The mother whimpered as the medics tried to move her away from her baby, her paws scraping the table, refusing to let them separate her. Her cries filled the room, raw and haunting. "Easy, girl. We've got him," James whispered, kneeling beside her stretcher. She quieted only when his hand pressed against her fur, his presence grounding her fear. Hours dragged on. The pup's heartbeat wavered, monitors flashing warnings that made James's chest tighten. The mother's eyes never closed. Even through pain, she kept her gaze fixed on her baby, as if sheer will alone could keep him alive in that tense, sterile room. Battle lines had been drawn again, not against enemies, but against time itself. Dawn broke slowly, casting pale light through the clinic windows. James sat slumped in a chair, exhaustion heavy in his bones, but his eyes never left the table where the pup lay. Hours of tense waiting had drained everyone, yet no one was willing to leave. The air was thick with anticipation, silence broken only by the steady hum of machines. Then, the sound came, a faint but steady beep. The pup stirred, its tiny chest rising with more strength than before. A collective sigh swept through the room. One medic smiled, shaking his head in disbelief. "He's fighting back," he whispered. The mother, as if sensing the change, let out a low whine. She shifted weakly, nudging forward until her nose brushed her pup's paw. For the first time since James had found her, her body seemed to relax. James reached down, stroking her fur gently. The shepherd lifted her head and rested it against his knee, eyes soft, trusting. The Marine's throat tightened. In that moment, he knew he wasn't just a rescuer. He had become part of their fight, their family. For the first time in hours, hope filled the room. The battle wasn't over, but victory felt within reach. Weeks passed, and the clinic that once echoed with cries now rang with playful barks. The pup, once fragile and fading, bounded clumsily across the floor, his tail wagging furiously. His mother, her wounds healed into scars of survival, watched closely, her protective gaze never leaving him. James visited daily, sometimes bringing treats, sometimes just sitting quietly by their side. Over time, the shepherd no longer tensed at his presence. Instead, she would nudge his hand, her eyes carrying gratitude words could never express. The pup followed suit, climbing into James's lap, licking his face until he laughed. It wasn't long before the decision became clear. Papers were signed, and the Marine walked out of the clinic with not just comrades in uniform, but with a new family, one loyal mother and her pup, both saved by compassion and courage. Months later, James could hardly imagine life without them. The German shepherd, once broken and bleeding, now walked proudly at his side, her pup bounding happily ahead. Together, they became a symbol of resilience, survivors bound not only by blood, but by the compassion of a Marine who refused to turn away. Their story spread quickly, touching thousands who saw in it a reminder of loyalty and sacrifice. People spoke of the mother's unyielding love and the Marine's choice to fight for lives others might have abandoned. What began in pain had transformed into a legacy of hope. One evening, James knelt in his yard as the pup curled in his lap, and the shepherd rested her head against his shoulder. He whispered, "You're safe now? Forever." And to you watching, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stories like this prove true heroes come in many forms.